It's because the United States has abandoned them and put them in a very difficult situation. It's because Israel felt the ability to attack Qatar without consequence, because the United States promised something that it can't deliver on. But it's not. I would say that it's less Saudi Arabia. Remember, Saudi Arabia did that strategic pact. Saudi Arabia already has a strategic pact with Pakistan. Already have it. It's sort of what they have here, but more. Turkey was always trying to get in on that. From the moment, it's Turkey that's been trying to get in on that. Turkey that's trying to shoehorn itself into the region. So I would say yes. While there is a need for Saudi Arabia to do it, and they played host to it. I think a big driving force for this was Turkey as well, because Turkey's constrained by its NATO membership. NATO no longer benefits Turkey at all. There's no benefit. Until the United States provides Turkey with F-35 fighters without consequence, without strings attached. When the United States gives Turkey F-35 fighters under the same conditions that it gives F-35 fighters to other NATO nations, then Turkey could say, oh yeah, we're a NATO member. But Turkey's not a NATO member. They're a NATO member in name only. Turkey, has its own thing going on. A large part of Turkey's defense priorities are outside of the framework of NATO. So Turkey is looking at the reality that they're not going to be a European nation, that they've been basically blocked off from Europe, and that their strategic direction, the Erdogan / post-Ottoman direction, is towards Central Asia and looking east. And it's not a relationship of conflict. It's supposed to be a relationship of cooperation and economic, collaboration. And so, Turkey's doing it. But again, what about Turkey and Qatar? Nobody talks about that, because the Saudis and the Qataris don't get along. You know that, right? And you do know that Turkey has a military presence in Qatar, a significant military presence in Qatar that was supposed to serve as a deterrent against any Saudi military pressure on Qatar. How does that work out? What happens to the Turkish presence in Somalia? The Turkish naval presence throughout the Red Sea, what Turkey's trying to do in Sudan. So I think this is part of Turkey trying to co-opt the region, as opposed to Saudi Arabia trying to co-opt Turkey. I think Erdogan is the real driver here, because he needs to be looking in this direction, and he wanted to latch on to an existing Saudi-Pakistani defensive pact.
There were, the Pakistani envoy went to Iran to send a message from the Prime Minister and Nassim Munir in Pakistan to Iranians, and he said he was talking with Iranian foreign minister. He said, what we did with Saudi Arabia and Turkey has nothing to do with Iran. Iran is not the target of that.
Yeah.
And the perception, by the way, in Iran was the same. How do you see, Scott, the way that Saudi Arabia is trying? One part of the problem with Saudi Arabia is what you've mentioned. Before the war started, the cooperation they had with American bases in their countries. Right now, you see, as an outcome of the war, they have been attacked because of those bases. And right now, they're seeking some sort of alternative for their security. But part of the problem is Saudi Arabia itself. For example, in Yemen, with Iraq, you don't see that sort of wisdom in the leadership of Saudi Arabia to bring down the tensions. Where does it come from, in your opinion?
Well, the big driver, I think, is MBS, and in his desire to position himself as the next king of Saudi Arabia. There's a lot of dissent inside Saudi Arabia. I can't say that I know everything perfectly, but we know that MBS has orchestrated over time the arrests of a number of family members, princes, who posed a potential political problem for him. So we in the outside sit there and go, "Oh, MBS, he's the guy." He's. But inside, I don't think he's as secure in his hold on power as he thinks, and he is posturing himself as the visionary, both in terms of what he can do for Saudi Arabia from a cultural standpoint. I think they're right now what Saudi Arabia 2030 is the new chant. Creating new cities and liberal opportunities for women. He's a reformer and all that, but he also has to be a security guy. And then always left unsaid is his relationship with the Ummah, the religious authorities. There's a deal with the devil that was made by the Saudi families, Sauds, with Wahhabism. That is a important part of this, and so there's a relationship there that requires Saudi Arabia to help export Wahhabism abroad as part of their foreign policy, and this requires Saudi Arabia to be more assertive in their posturing regionally, and so I think this is what what's driving this. He can't be seen as allowing the Zaid movement in Yemen. I think I got that right. They're not Shia Twelvers. They're Zaidism.
Zaidi. Yeah.
Zaidi, yeah. You can't let the Zaid, who are deemed by the Wahhabists to be absolute apostates. These are Satanists. These are the worst people in the world. They're not even Muslim, according to the Wahhabis. So a lot of what's going on in Yemen is religious based, because Saudi Arabia can't be seen as peacefully coexisting with these people, especially when they thumb the nose at them by kicking out the pro-Saudi government of Yemen and installing themselves. This is a long-standing, religious issue, and the same thing with the Shia of Iraq. You can't have Shia militias sending, rockets into Saudi Arabia or drones into Saudi Arabia. My God, that can't happen. That's an insult to the Wahhabis. So a lot of the Saudi posturing is just driven by the absolute illogic of Wahhabist fanaticism. We don't think that, because when we look at the face of Saudi Arabia, we see Saudi Arabia 2030. But dig a little bit deeper into Saudi Arabia, and you realize there's a bunch of head chopping Wahhabist fanatics out there who have a stronger grip than one would think on the internal domestic political dynamic of Saudi Arabia.
Mike Huckabee said that President Trump has not just proven that he was willing to bomb them, he's mentioning Iran, but he's also willing to bankrupt them. It seems that in the eyes of the Trump administration, the continuation of the war would be the blockade on Iranian ports. That's going to work without, fighting, without being in an active tit for tat. It seems that so far Iran has attacked multiple tankers in the Strait of Hormuz, but you don't see any sort of reactions from the United States the way it was before. And Scott Bessent 2 days ago said they're gonna, in the next 2 years, they're gonna introduce new pipelines that's gonna make the Strait of Hormuz irrelevant. Where is it? What is your understanding of the way that Donald Trump is continuing the fight?
We have to call a spade. Who won the war? I'd like to hear your opinion. Just did the United States win the war, or did Iran win the war? I think you would agree with me that Iran won the war.
Yeah.
Did they win slightly, or was it decisively? I think we could say decisively. I think this is the first time in the history of the United States that we lost a war. And what I mean by that is, people say, Scott, didn't we lose Vietnam? So war is an extension of politics by other means. So we lost the Vietnam War politically. But no one can make the case that the North Vietnamese kicked our ass. No. Every time we did a stand-up fight with them, we won. We bombed the crap out of them. We won every tactical engagement on the ground. But we lost because politically we couldn't sustain the conflict. The American people lost faith with the government over the conflict. Same thing with Afghanistan. Did the Taliban beat us in a stand-up fight? No. Every time the Taliban stood and fought, they died. It's just that, we didn't have what it took. We couldn't get the political support to go in all in, just like in Vietnam. And so we ended up fighting this half-assed war, and the American people lost faith with it, and we withdrew. But you can't say we were beaten. I mean, if Chris Donahue had gotten out, turned around on the airplane, told the 82nd to disembark and go into Kabul and slaughter the Taliban, we would have done it. There would have been a damn thing the Taliban could have done. They couldn't beat us, but there was no support for it, no will to do it. America lost the will to fight. Iran, we want to fight. We can't. We got beat. We got beat. And you say, well, Scott, we ran out of ammunition. That's not really getting beat. To you, that means you don't understand anything about war. War is about systems. Systems functioning the way they're supposed to be. And a key thing about a system is that it's not just about how it operates at the cutting edge. It's about all the maintenance that goes on behind it, the sustainability. If you're going to go mow the lawn, don't brag to me about how sharp the blade is. If you're going to run out of gas halfway through and you didn't have a plan to get more gas in the machine, because now you're not mowing the lawn. The lawn kicked your ass because you didn't have a plan to continue this. We started a conflict with Iran that was predicated on things that just weren't going to happen. It showed a fundamental lack of understanding about the threat we were facing. We're going to kill the supreme leader, which we could do. And then what? Iran's supposed to collapse. And then we were placed with a government to our liking who will give up their missile program, give up their nuclear program, give up their relationship with Hezbollah and Ansarallah, and everything would be good. That's how we were going to win the war. Win the war with the first 6 bombs dropped on Iran. Well, we lost the war with the first 6 bombs dropped on Iran because we killed the supreme leader, causing Iran to rally around itself tighter than it's ever been in terms of support for the regime. So there's no chance of regime collapse whatsoever. And then we went ahead and lost the moral authority because not only through assassination, because this was an act of perfidy. Many Americans tended to forget this, but I don't think the Iranians will ever forget that we were in active negotiations with the Iranians about the nuclear program that Donald Trump said was the most thing in the world. And the Iranians made significant compromises, and there was a deal going on an airplane via the Omani foreign minister to, bring this thing to closure. And the Iranians thought that they had done something good, and then we bombed. It's an act of perfidy. It's a war crime. That's how we started this war, with a war crime. Then we murdered somebody, an assassination. That's another crime. And then we went out in the first day and we killed 168 students at the Manab school. Another crime, showing we don't have a clue what we're doing. We started a war that we lost on day one because it meant we couldn't win. But we kept saying we're going to do it. We changed our war plan. The other thing is, why are we changing our war plan every other day if we had such a good plan? It's because we didn't have a plan. We had no idea what we were doing, just making it up as we go along. And every time we did something, it just got worse and worse and worse and worse, expanding the conflict, dropping more bombs, firing more missiles, and causing the Iranians to send more missiles our way. And next thing you know, we ran out of ammunition. I'm sorry, guys. When you run out of ammunition, you lost the war, because war is about a system of systems. And the system that was supposed to sustain the conflict fell apart. And so the United States lost the war because we couldn't sustain the war, not because the American people gave up on the war. Hell, they didn't even know what's going on. They still don't even know what's going on because Donald Trump's been lying to them day one. This isn't Vietnam where the American people were in the street saying, bring our boys home. I mean, hopefully that'll happen. We get more people in the street, but that's not why this war ended. This war didn't end because the American people said, hell no, we won't go. In fact, as many Americans like, blow the crap out of these guys. Can't. He's out of ammo. And it's not just that, but the Iranians have seized the geopolitical, high ground, so to speak, by controlling the Strait of Hormuz and Bab el-Mandeb. So they're strangling not just the United States economy, but the global economy because they're interlinked. So the Iranians have strategic dominance over the United States. They have tactical dominance insofar as the United States lacks the capacity to project meaningful military power into Iran. Iran retains the capacity to project meaningful military power into the United States military infrastructure and the support of the infrastructure of its allies. We can't defend ourselves against the Iranians. So the Iranians are doing more damage to us than we are doing to them. That's unsustainable. We lost militarily, but we also lost economically and politically because of Iran's ability to control the Strait of Hormuz and control Bab el-Mandeb, maintain relationship with Hezbollah, maintain relationships with Ansarallah, and dominate the region militarily. It's called getting your ass kicked. We got our ass kicked. And this is the first time in history that the United States got its ass kicked. The first time. That's, and so this is where we're at right now. Trump can't admit it, can't acknowledge it. This is why we hear stupidity like the wall of steel. I think he just put out a tweet where he reiterated.